Life Audio.
Welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations, a podcast where we bring hope, help, and resources to families homeschooling children with unique learning needs. I'm your host, Peggy Ployhar, and today we're exploring a topic that touches the hearts of many parents, teaching a nonverbal child without reading or writing. Joining me is co-host Stephanie Buckwalter, a veteran homeschool mom and curriculum creator who truly understands this challenge. She's the original developer of the ELARP method, now rebranded as Adapted Home Education, and the creator of Spell As You Go, a reading, spelling, and communication program designed specifically for nonverbal students. Stephanie's journey is one of faith, persistence, and innovation. She's walked through the confusion of isolation of trying to teach a child who couldn't speak or respond in traditional ways, and she's come out on the other end with wisdom and tools to share, and she's sharing with us today. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hi, Peggy. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you.
Yes,
I'm happy to be here.
Co-host and being the guest instead of the host.
That's right. Got to switch.
Yeah, but we're going to have a very insightful conversation today, and one that is just not addressed enough in the homeschooling realm, but so needed because, as you know personally, and as I've known with my own child, not having the nonverbal part, but the lack of resources, and just how desperate we feel as parents when we feel like there's nobody out there that really understands, or at least we feel that way, or we feel like there's all these resources, but nothing quite fits. And how do we navigate something that we know God has called us to, or we feel like we've been pressured into it out of, the lack of nothing else. And yet there doesn't seem to be anywhere to go. So I'm excited for all you have to share today.
Thanks. I'll give a spoiler alert based on that. There is nothing that fits, but there are things we can do to make things fit better. So just look at that spoiler alert right up.
Absolutely. And that's kind of a nice reassurance, because it's not like I'm selling you something and you've got to spend thousands of dollars on my program to make this work. There are ways to work around what's already out there that isn't going to break the bank. And I know we talk a lot about that on this show. And so yes, just know we're not here to sell you something. We're here to just encourage and equip you with what you need. So Stephanie, share a little bit about your backstory, just as we get started, with your homeschooling and especially with your daughter, just so our audience has kind of an understanding of where you're coming from in your history.
Okay. Well, I've been homeschooling for over 20 years. I'm still homeschooling. I have 5 children, 4 boys, and then a girl. The boys, I homeschooled all of them different lengths of time. One of the boys I homeschooled all the way through high school, another one through 8th grade, 2 through 5th grade. And my daughter, who is moderate intellectual disability, special needs, nonverbal, I started homeschooling her along with the boys. And then we had a family crisis and I put her in school for a few years. And then we took her back out and we finished homeschooling at home. We finished high school at home with her. And now she's officially graduated high school, but I'm still working with her.
Yeah.
The nice thing about it is I'm not having to work on the things that I think I should work on. I can work on anything I want to work on, and that's so freeing.
Yes, you don't have to follow the state standards anymore. You can just do what needs to be done. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's and that's encouraging that you've been at this that long and you stuck to it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too, and what that process was like for you as an encouragement as well. So definitely stick around. Also know that this is live. I know sometimes we broadcast recordings, but this is a live conversation. So if you are watching us either on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram, just know that you can comment and we will see those and we can include them as part of the conversation too. So don't feel left out. We want you to be part of this too. So nonverbal children are often diagnosed as having intellectual disability. What does that label really mean? And can it be misunderstood?
Well, it can, in the sense that intellectual disability, I found this out when I was attending a program at the Family Hope Center, and I started learning about all the different ways our bodies can be neurologically disorganized. When it comes to coming up with an IQ score, most of tests designed, even those for nonverbal kids, are really designed for kids who also know how to motor plan. And we're going to talk about that a lot today, because motor planning goes right alongside with apraxia, not speaking. And when you can't motor plan, and motor planning can be speaking, writing, pointing, it could be any of those things. If you can't motor plan, you can't give a true measure of what's going on in your head, your cognitive skills.
Oh, yeah.
And so intellectual disability, where they give you an IQ score, that IQ score is really, for kids who are non-typical, a measure of their neurological organization, not of their intelligence. It's not helpful in the sense, but the thing that's positive about that, if you think about it that way, is you can work on a child's neurological organization. You see all these brain training programs and reflex integration programs. Those are all designed to work on the brain and neurological organization. And when you start doing that, then you can actually get better outcomes because you're improving the brain function, which would, as a result, eventually change the IQ potentially.
Wow.
So IQ is not
That's really interesting.
helpful, except as a clue that you need to be looking for the right kind of therapy.
Right. There's something else in there that, it's just not coming out. So being nonverbal is often accompanied with other diagnoses, which you're kind of leading to, or challenges. How does that complexity affect in teaching?
Well, yeah, and you're right. I just mentioned it, the motor planning part of it, because apraxia is a disconnect between the brain and the body, and so you have a motor planning problem. And I mentioned pointing, handwriting, and speech, but it's also typing, drawing, putting numbers in a column. There are a lot of things that your child may want to do, and may in their brain know how to do, but can't motor plan those things. Or when they motor plan it, actually, especially if they're pointing, or even if they have verbal tics kind of come out, because my daughter can say yes and no. And yesterday we were at our SPED communication therapy, and we asked her a question, and she loves shopping, and it was about going shopping. And the first word out of her mouth was no. She was so disorganized that she wanted to say yes, but no came out. And that happens a lot with these kids, especially under stress. And so that also means that, to demonstrate knowledge, 3 things have to fire at the same time. And I got this through talking to my daughter's OT. And that's the sensory system has to receive the information. You have to have the cognitive process, the thoughts, and then you have to have the motor plan on that you want to express those thoughts. And if all 3 of those are not firing together, then your child is going to look like they don't know how to think, when they may actually very well have a high IQ or a normal IQ, but they just can't motor plan answers. So that really affects your teaching, because it looks like learning's not taking place. And that's why we get stuck in perpetual elementary school or perpetual kindergarten even, because it looks like they're not learning, but it's not a cognitive problem. It can very easily be a motor planning problem.
It's so helpful in understanding. It takes like that frustration. When you gain understanding, you tend to like lose that anxiety of my child's not learning, I'm not teaching right. All those questions that have gone through your mind, they've gone through my mind, they're prevalent in our community. I know in the past I've talked to you about this. I'm throwing this little question in here off the side, but assumed intelligence. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I have read enough stories of kids, especially in the autism world, but also other diagnoses, who have learned spelled communication when they've gotten older, and they're able to express their thoughts. And several of these kids actually go on to college, or they finish high school, or they can do things. They just didn't have the means to communicate. And the way that works, just as a quick aside, the way that works is they get things out of fine motor, which is all that speech and handwriting and stuff we were talking about, and they put it into large motor movements. And that eases up the body's cognitive load, which allows them to think and spell and get it all out. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But a lot of these young people, young adults have written books, or even when they're teenagers, written books that say, I knew what they were saying. Some of them a lot of them teach themselves to read. And so when they're older and they start doing the spelled communication, it's shocking that a lot of times they already know how to spell quite a bit. Or they've taught themselves to read, and it's because we don't believe it. But they have, if you think about it, if you don't speak, because I see this with my daughter all the time. We're sitting at the dinner table, and all this conversation's going around because, we have a big family and sometimes people are over. But she rarely gets included. And when she does, it's just like a yes or no answer. So her whole life is spent observing, and she is picking up just like little kids, when you're a parent, little kids are picking up stuff that you don't want them to pick up.
We will continue this conversation after a short break.
Hey there, parents. Are you tired of the babysitter search struggle? Look no further. Welcome to KingdomCareSitters.com, where Christian families connect with like-minded sitters who share their faith.
I was searching for a reliable sitter who understands our faith and family dynamics. With KingdomCareSitters.com, I found the perfect match.
And guess what? You can discover sitter profiles, post jobs, and even schedule and book short-term or long-term care, all on the user-friendly website, KingdomCareSitters.com.
Plus, KingdomCareSitters.com lets you pay securely online. Whether it's date night, work commitments, or just some me time, Kingdom Care's got you covered.
As a sitter, I love being part of this community. I set my own rates, connect with amazing families, and make a difference in their lives.
Are you ready to find your perfect match? Visit KingdomCareSitters.com today, because when faith meets childcare, it's a match made in heaven.
For some of us, personal finances aren't just personal. They include loved ones, neighbors, the communities we call home, and the causes we hold in our hearts. At Thrivent, planning your finances is bigger than just money. We help you put your plans into motion and faith into action so you can do more for the ones in your heart. Because sometimes all you need to make a difference is someone to help you make it happen. Thrivent, where money means more. Connect with us at Thrivent.com.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.
Well, our I can't. I was just horrified. Like when she learns how to talk, when she learns how to spell communication, she's gonna start saying all kinds of things. I'm like, oh no, I really didn't mean that. From 10 years ago. But that's what happens is they're learning all the time, just like you and I do. They just can't express it. They might not be learning what you want them to, but they're learning and they're observing. They're very good observers. So that affects your teaching in the sense that you want to be aware that they can learn. So just treat them that way.
And all of that's going in. It doesn't mean just because it isn't coming out that it's not going in. And it's just a really, really good reminder that, whether we see evidence of the learning or not, what we are doing is making a difference. And I think parents just need to hear that over and over again. You are making a difference, whether you see it or not, and just keep going. So, communication. Well, go ahead.
I was going to say another thing about that comes out in those books that I want parents to know. You're talking about encouraging them is these kids know that their bodies are not doing what they want them to do, and they feel bad about it. They feel just as bad about all this stuff going on as you do. But they want a vibrant life. They want to be able to communicate what they're thinking, but they also understand what their behavior looks like. It's not like that's some kind of secret. You don't have to keep that a family secret between them. And so when I realized that, I started talking to my daughter and saying, I understand that your brain is telling your body one thing. You need to help your brain calm down. I talk about her brain as like a separate entity. So that her thoughts, she can apply her thoughts to her brain and the nervous system, brain meaning brain and nervous system, to get it calmed down. So we've started working a lot on that since I realized this. But it's just another thing I wanted to let parents know.
Yeah. That's great advice and encouragement as well. Yeah. So as far as communication, that is obviously a barrier. If they can't speak to you, you don't understand. So what types of communication tools are available to students and parents?
There are actually a whole lot, but they're kind of divided into 3 categories. One of them is no tech. So that would be gestures, body language, crying, screaming, yelling, hitting, all of those things.
The first go-tos often, yes.
Yes, frustration runs high with them. Facial expressions, sign language is a more formal way to communicate.
Yes.
Or vocalizations of any kind. Like my daughter maybe has 10 or 15 words that she uses all the time. She can kind of say her colors. She can say mom and dad, and she can say no. Of course. And then, so those kind of fall into the no tech thing. And we can talk about each of these a little bit more if you want to, because each of them has pros and cons and kind of my story.
Yeah, I think that would be really important because I think parents who are listening to this are definitely looking for that information too.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go because we hit all of these. And then low tech, picture communication boards. Those are the ones just a thing with just pictures on it and your child can point to them.
Yeah.
PECs is actually individual pictures that you move around on strips of Velcro, but they use the same type of pictures. Alphabet boards, which are the ABC boards that you see for spelled communication. You'll see them, the little stencils and that kind of thing. Core word boards. So if you want your child to, at least if your child has low cognitive function, and you can just put a few words up and let them communicate through those few words, like thirsty, bathroom, tired, no, yes. Mm-hmm. And then using tangible symbols, like the keys, like your child may go pick up the keys if they want to go somewhere, or they may point to the door, take you over to the door if they want to go outside. Mm-hmm. And then another low tech thing, visual schedules. You can communicate through those, and they can communicate back. Yes, no, did it, didn't do it. So those are the low tech options, and then there are high tech options, and those are a very simple one is called the Big Mac or Little Mac, and they're buttons. They're just single message devices. They just say yes, I've seen those. Or no, and that's it. And there are also Go Talk devices, which you would have a thing of buttons, and each one has a pre-recorded message. And so it's like the child is speaking in sentences. They're quick talker devices, the 32 message communicators, battery operated devices with simple speech functions, the AAC devices. These are all kind of AAC devices, and AAC stands for assistive and augmentative communication. Okay. So it's any, in this case, technology device that you use to assist in communication is an AAC device. Okay. And insurance will pay for some of them and some they won't.
That's good to know. It doesn't hurt to ask.
Yes. And if you go to a public school, the school can actually evaluate your child for which one of these is best for your child at the stage. You may have to fight for what you want, but they can at least do the evaluation, tell you what they think.
Right. Yeah.
Because we had that.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you talked a little bit about pros and cons of some of those. Can you go over at least a few and maybe some that you have personal experience with or any stories you have to share with that?
Okay. I'll go through my journey with communication.
Options. That would be really helpful. Yes.
Because we started with low tech and no tech and moved right through. So one thing we did early on was we learned sign language. I had already done through like the baby sign language with my boys when they were little. So I was aware of sign language, which helped.
Right.
And it was right around the time signing time came out. Signingtime.com. It's a woman who had a deaf child. And then a year later, her sister had a little boy. And so they learned sign language together. They made all these cute little videos. And the thing I like best about these videos, well, two things. One is they showed a bunch of different kids doing the signs. So it gave me comfort to know that an approximation of a sign is just as good. Like if this is dad, she doesn't have to do this. As a matter of fact, because she has proprioceptive problems, dad was back here because she proprioceptive.
Oh, wow.
Your sense is you don't know where you are in space. So this hand, instead of being dad here, started back here. And then eventually, like over months, it moved forward. And then it finally ended up on her forehead. But seeing
Well, it was a
those
good
little kids-
diagnostic tool too in itself.
Yeah, good point. So seeing all those little kids doing these approximations of these signs, like no two were exactly alike,
Right.
was very, very helpful for me. And the other thing that's very helpful, because if you go to their website, you can, back then I had to go to the library and get CDs.
Oh, yes,
and play
I did
them.
the same thing. Actually, I think they were VHS tapes.
Oh, we had graduated to CDs, and we had to, you could only keep them for a week. So whatever was there, we'd get
Right.
one or two, and then we'd return them, and we just cycled through them. And I think the first 10 videos were out at the time. Now you can get them online and you can rent them. But if you rent them like that, if you do the subscription, at the end of those videos, they have a 5 or 10 minute sections that is just the signs. So as a parent, you don't have to watch the 30-minute videos all the time with your child.
That's nice.
You do it a few
Yes.
times. But at the very end, there was just a summary. So if I forgot a sign, I could just go back there and look at it. I didn't have to try to find it in the video.
Oh, yeah.
So it was very helpful. So sign language was helpful. My daughter, from signing time alone, she learned over the years. It took years. I'm not talking about a week. Remember, she's out of high school now. So this is recently out of high school. But so this was when she was really young, preschool age into early elementary. She learned 300 signs. And then what I did was I got books of sign language signs, and or there's also some things online that I used. And I knew when we were going to church, I was trying to learn sign language too. So I would ask them what songs they were going to sing. And I would look up all the words in all the songs. And I was doing signing exact English. I was not doing American Sign Language.
Yeah.
So I would look up all the signs and I would try to sign to the slower songs. I couldn't do the fast ones. Or the way I practiced. She also learned the alphabet. A, B, C, D. Both hands. you got to learn with both hands because you never know which one you're going to have available. And I would just spell things, like we were driving down the road and I would just spell whatever I saw on signs. And that's how I got to practice. So it took, I was practicing along with her. Whatever communication you're doing with your child, you're probably going to be their primary communication partner. So it's not something where you can send them off somewhere to learn this stuff. You've got to learn it with them.
That's so true.
That's what we did. So we learned another 300 signs that way. So if I sat down and gave her a list of words and said, I'd give her a word that she could sign, she could do up to 600 at one point. So this was by third or fourth grade. And then then that was about the time we put her in public school, and they didn't want to work with sign language. They wanted to work with the AAC device, and that's okay because that's what I wanted to. And so we mutually agreed that she would switch to an AAC device. The problem with the AAC device, we also tried PEX, the picture exchange communication. Let me go back. So the low tech stuff that we did, the picture PEX, I actually, laminated all the things, got the Velcro, got the binder, this big 3-inch binder with all the pictures. That was really hard for me to learn. Like I said, you have to learn along with them. And PEX was just so difficult for me that we didn't get very far with it. Maybe she could have, but I couldn't. So that was a non-starter for us.
We will continue this conversation after a short break.
Hey there, parents. Are you tired of the babysitter search struggle? Look no further. Welcome to KingdomCareSitters.com, where Christian families connect with like-minded sitters who share their faith.
I was searching for a reliable sitter who understands our faith and family dynamics. With KingdomCareSitters.com, I found the perfect match.
And guess what? You can discover sitter profiles, post jobs, and even schedule and book short-term or long-term care, all on the user-friendly website, KingdomCareSitters.com.
Plus, KingdomCareSitters.com lets you pay securely online. Whether it's date night, work commitments, or just some me time, Kingdom Care's got you covered.
As a sitter, I love being part of this community. I set my own rates, connect with amazing families, and make a difference in their lives.
Are you ready to find your perfect match? Visit KingdomCareSitters.com today, because when faith meets childcare, it's a match made in heaven.
For some of us, personal finances aren't just personal. They include loved ones, neighbors, the communities we call home, and the causes we hold in our hearts. At Thrivent, planning your finances is bigger than just money. We help you put your plans into motion and faith into action so you can do more for the ones in your heart. Because sometimes all you need to make a difference is someone to help you make it happen. Thrivent, where money means more. Connect with us at Thrivent.com.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.
Right.
Okay.
Well, it has to work for everybody, not just the child too, because like you said, the parent is the main communicator with the child usually. And if it doesn't work for you, it's not going to work for them. So,
Right.
yeah.
And that was a pretty much a no. Although we did use the symbols and I used the pictures, and I would use them more as a communication board, not the official PEC system and the way they explain how to use it. Core words, visual schedules, we use those kind of things. So we did use that low tech stuff. The visual schedules are very helpful for her. Even today, when she's having a really hard time, which she has been these last few days, she just cannot process what you're saying to her. And so I will grab an index card. I always have a stack of index cards, and I draw pictures of what I'm saying, or even write out the words in some cases. And if she sees it, then her brain can say, again, the brain is a separate entity. Her brain says, oh, and then she gets it. But sometimes I just have to do that. So I use, hand draw, learn how to sketch. And here's the key when you're doing this sketching stuff. It does not matter what your drawing looks like as long as communication takes place.
Yes, it's so true. You don't have to be an artist to make that work.
That's right. Because when my boys were older, they would go, Mom, but you didn't say blah, blah, blah. And I said, did communication take place? And they would always say, yes. So that's what as long as communication takes place, it doesn't matter what you look like, what your drawings look like. Right. And then we moved into the high tech. We went from the sign language to all the picture stuff, the low tech, to the high tech. And the problem, it was fascinating for me. The school really supported me and helped me, and they sent me to the teacher training for the AAC device, the software that she had and everything. So we actually had a pretty good relationship. But the one thing at that training was there was a man there, a young man, who was using an AAC device to communicate using LAMP Words for Life. That's the one we were using. And he could communicate in sentences and thoughts and all that stuff. But one thing that caught my attention that he said was that eventually, so the device has only like 2,000 or 3,000 words on it. Eventually, he got to the point where he would think in those 2,000 or 3,000 words. So it wasn't free, open communication. His communication was still limited by that. And that kind of gave me pause. I still tried to work with her on the AAC device, but she wasn't becoming fluent in sentences and stuff like that. The other problem with working with an AAC device I found is often, and I have friends who are speech therapists and occupational therapists. And so if you're a speech therapist listening, I don't want you to feel like I'm attacking you, because I'm not. But often the people who were tasked with teaching these kids on the AAC device are the speech therapist. And what I have observed, and this is my personal experience, is that most speech therapists they kind of move speech therapy onto the AAC device. They haven't learned how to teach. It's not speech therapy on a device. It's communication, which is to me a whole different approach and a way of communicating on that device. And so if you're searching, if you're, shopping around for a speech therapist, or if you have, the opportunity to look for one who has had some kind of training and understands that this is communication. And now this was in the early days, mind you, because everyone was getting iPads back then. And so it was becoming more prevalent in school that people were using devices, whereas before it was too expensive, cost prohibitive. And, you were just kind of out of luck. But so this was, now our experience with all this, with the speech therapist stuff, was in the early days. So that was maybe 5 to 10 years ago, between 5 to 10 years ago, during that stretch when AAC devices, because my daughter got an iPad 6 months after they came out, because that's when the communication software came out. And we're like, oh, we're getting that.
Yeah.
And so she was ready for high tech, and she could maneuver it. But I'm sure by now a lot of speech therapists have figured out, or have maybe specialized in it. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. So look for a speech therapist who specializes in AAC communication and is not primarily a speech therapist using the physical, manipulating the face and stuff like that, because they really are two different skills. And so it makes sense that they would put it with speech because it's kind of speech. And they have a lot, and the speech therapists have a lot of background in what needs to happen in the progression. But just look for one that specializes in AAC is my recommendation on that.
That's a great.
So that was our experience with AAC. So now we've come full circle, and we're back to no tech. So we're using an ABC board. We're using a letter board now, and I didn't bring it. I didn't bring it with me to this area, but it's very. So it's no tech at this point, and then eventually, hopefully, it'll transfer to a keyboard, which then would be high tech again. But to learn, the way those things work is, and this is why we're doing it, is we learn that it gets. Remember, I talked about the three things that have to fire at the same time: the sensory, the cognitive, and the motor.
Planning. Yep.
And by putting it on, what they do is they don't just stick you on a 26-letter board. They put you on 3 boards with just a few letters. Like I think it's 9 or 10 letters on each board, about 9 letters. 8, 9, and 9. I had to add up 26 real quick. I'm not good at the math. And the letters are bigger. They're spaced out further. If you only have to search 8 things at a time to make a decision, it lessens the cognitive load. And it also gives you a bigger target. So when you're motor planning, because the cognitive load is less, the motor planning is easier. It frees up space to do the motor planning, which is the problem. And, usually we're trying to do it in a fine motor sense, but by using pointing, you're using large motor. So all of those things are reducing the cognitive load and the motor load, the load on the brain, the overall load, so that you can scan with your eyes, target the letter you want, think that's the letter I want, and then hit it. And doing that takes a lot of energy. And I know that because my daughter has brain problems, and we have been doing this therapy, and we switched to the next step up, which is more intense. And she just started falling apart in her life. And it's because the cognitive load, the brain load was too much. So we have to, step back from that and do it in smaller steps, which is kind of the whole thing, nonverbal apraxia. That's what I just said now. If you didn't catch that, is to all my moms. That's the key, is sometimes the steps are just too big, and you've got to find ways to make it smaller and smaller. And I know I've heard Peggy say before that when curriculum developers want to help our community, and they say, well, what can we do? And Peggy, tell them what you always say.
I always say, well, just give us more to do in the curriculum you've already created. The problem is our kids can't take as large leaps as they mentally think that kids can take from one step to the next. It's that scaffolding in between, and those extra activities, those extra hands-on things that you can make a 1-year curriculum into 2 or 3 years. And that's really what our kids need. And so, yes, I say it over and over again to the curriculum developers. And actually, there's one big curriculum company who's going to be doing a summit in November. I'm not announcing it yet because they haven't announced anything. But they're bringing in a whole group of people that I gave them a list of and said, we want to have a summit and we want to hear what you guys have to say so we can change what we do and make it more adaptable. So things are changing because people are listening to what we've been talking about for years. But yes, it's a very exciting time in the homeschooling industry and for parents who are really seeking for something to help them along that isn't taking large leaps and bounds that their kids mentally can't take. And Stephanie, you've done a great job of really helping us to understand that better, because I think we get frustrated because we're like, well, why aren't they getting there? And to understand from the child's point of view that they want to get there, but it's just not mentally they're not mentally capable of making that leap. And we have to figure out how to help them get there.
And that's where I would say, with my new understanding, this is a new understanding So fairly recent. And it's not really even the cognitive, it's getting them all to fire at the same time. And that's what I'm learning through this adult communication stuff, which we've only been doing since last September. So this truly is new information for me.
Yeah.
That slowing down the curriculum, like you're talking about, having the curriculum to give you more to do, then you have time to work on those motor plans, the motor planning part of it, and manipulating that sensory input so that they can express themselves. And but you need the curriculum to be you need the curriculum to address the cognitive part. So that's 100% right. And that's what, because we can't ask them to do all the other things. Those are separate things. Those are therapy type things. But yes. Right. So now I'm coming full circle saying, yes, you were right. The curriculum developers can help tremendously by producing curriculum that is in small steps so that the parents have time to work with their children on the other two pieces, the sensory piece and the motor planning piece.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that brings us to things like subjects, like learning to read. I think that in general, even for children who don't struggle, is like one of the biggest stressors for a homeschool parent. I remember when I hit that first roadblock with my oldest and went, I don't even know how this works. And yet now if you have a nonverbal child, how do you teach them how to read? What approach, can you take? And then how do you know if they actually are reading and can't show it?
That is, that was my biggest question in the beginning, because like reading is so important because the rest of the school relies on you being able to read. And it's like, well, how do you know if they're reading if they can't read out loud? And no one could answer that question for me. I asked all over the place. And even now, most people won't have an answer. So I may not have a good one. But
you have one.
I have a clue. I have a clue. I don't know if it's an answer. I have a clue to the answer. When we went for intensive speech therapy at one point when my daughter was at the end of 5th grade, getting ready to go into 6th grade. Oh no, she was already in 6th grade. So she was in 6th grade. We went to Arizona for a couple of weeks for intensive speech therapy. And while we were there, the therapist gave her a nonverbal reading test. And I had never seen this before. And I know they existed, but they don't like to put examples online because they don't want anybody copying it.
Right.
They're all copyrighted and that kind of stuff. But what it was a picture. She would have like 2 sentences and a picture. And it would be like a boy and a dog running across the field, and the sun was close to the horizon. Is that right? Yes. And so you would show the child the picture, have them read those 2 sentences, and then answer the questions. And the questions were like, and the picture would give you clues too.
Right.
But it's like, I'm sorry. There was the picture, and then you had to answer the question. So there were no sentences describing the picture. It was just the picture.
Oh, okay.
And then you had to read the question. So if you could read the question correctly, they knew you understood the question. Said, so which sentence is describing this picture? The boy and his dog are going home for lunch. The boy is going home for, to fix the car or something. Or the boy and his dog are going home for dinner. And the child, you couldn't say any of it. They would read those 3 and they would have to pick they're going home for dinner. And the clues from the picture are that the sun was going down. It was close to the horizon. It wasn't noon, so they wasn't going home for lunch. Mm-hmm. And in one sentence, the dog wasn't with him. It was just the boy. So they would change up different elements. So you knew that the child was reading all 3 to get the right answer. Right. And found out she was reading at a 1st grade level. And I was like, and then I told the school, and they're like, no, she doesn't. And I was like, oh. And then they tested her and like, oh, she does. And I said, yes, that means I taught her that, not the school. If they didn't know it, that means they weren't doing it. I was doing it. So that kind of made me feel good as a parent. It's like, okay, I can homeschool a special needs child. I taught her to read at 1st grade level. So so the clue is you have to give them ways to express how they know. And you can do it through the pictures.
Right.
You could do it through words. You can do it like that, where you show them a picture and then you write out some sentences, and you kind of, that's not how you teach them, but that's how you know if they are. So that's kind of the testing part of it.
Right.
So that's my clue. And the way we got to the first grade level was I was using the Soma rapid prompting method. I just got her red book, the red one, I think was one of the first ones she wrote. I think she has 6 or 7 books out now, but it was a red one. And she said, and it was basically all I did up to this point. I wasn't even doing the spelling boards, even though that's what the method eventually ends up as. Back then, I was just, as we would talk about things, when I came to a word I thought I'd want her to know, I would say it, take a little index card, usually cut into 4 because she could read smaller text, write out the word as I said it, and then say it again, and then keep going. And then after we finished talking, I had all those words I had spelled, and I would give her, a couple of choices, and then she would choose the answer without me having to read the word back to her. And I believe that's how she learned, just using the pre-letterboard stage of the Soma rapid prompting method, where you you're always, and so that's why my programs spell as you go, because if you just spell stuff as you go, and now if we're out in public and I don't have something to write on, she knows the 26 letters in sign language, so I will spell it with sign language. And it's a visual, because if I just say it, her auditory processing is kind of an issue. So I will spell it, like the word is lamp, L-A-M-P. And it's funny because when she's spelling words on her letterboard, sometimes she'll be pointing with her right hand and she'll be spelling it with her left hand.
Wow.
Because we've done. And the other advantage, by the way, going back to our communication options, teaching the sign language alphabet, and we also worked with phonics, assigning sounds to those letters, that if she wants to go somewhere, she can't spell the words yet with sign language or on the boards, but she can give me the first letter. Like if it's a person, if she goes A, I know that's Miss Anita. And if she gives an A, I know that's Miss Shannon. So, and if she does this, that's the J. J up here is a guy, J down here is a girl. And so I know if she's talking about a brother or a sister-in-law, because one's up here, one's down here. Proprioceptive has improved. Getting them in the right place. So there's a huge advantage. So any communication you work on with your child is going to be helpful, and you will not regret it. And it also gives your child multiple options, because if they may be moving forward in their communication skills, but they're going to have bad days, especially, when there are days when they are more neurologically disorganized, whether it's stress or they ate the wrong thing or whatever.
We all are.
Good point. Then they have a fallback. So you want to give them as many fallback positions as you can. So teach them all the ways to communicate. But I'm sure eventually we'll talk about adulthood. But I just want to talk about teaching to read right now. So that's my clue, is they can, and just spell things for them. And I was actually watching Andrew Pudewa. He has a video out on YouTube on spelling. And he was talking about how he was taught to spell, and his mom would spell to him. However, he said, back in the day, back in the early 1900s, before paper was too expensive, they didn't have workbooks for every kid. You spelled everything orally. You worked orally. And so his mom, having grown up in that generation, was teaching. I don't know if she was that old, but in the early 1900s, so, by the mid 1900s, she just, whenever they were out, driving around the car, she would just spell things. And so I would encourage you to do the same thing. And one thing he said in this talk that he gave was that you hear it, and if you're spelling it hearing it, like a kid can see, if a kid is just doing sight words, they're learning kind of the shape of the letter. And if the shape looks wrong, they know it's misspelled. But if it has a similar shape to another word, you can't really tell.
Right.
So his point was, when you also spell it out loud as you're spelling, it reinforces the sequence of the letters in the word. So it's helpful. Right. Yes. And I think with this thing I was doing, the early stages of the Soma method, Soma RPM, was she was seeing it, she was hearing it, and she was able to touch it later, like physically touch the piece of paper it was
Right.
on. So it was
Well,
bringing in all the senses, and it made a difference. I mean, I didn't know she was reading at a first grade level, but she was
Yeah.
just from doing that.
That's awesome. So when you were talking about that, as well as Andrew's method, both of those methods also bring those words into context. They don't just, they aren't just these words in a list like we often see that how kids learn. And they're not associated with how that word is used, what it really means, how it's used with other words. So you're teaching a whole lot more by using those types of methodologies when you're out and about, or when you're using it with other words and a text. So it just makes them more powerful and as homeschoolers, we have that ability to teach like that. So that's some awesome advice.
Yes, I am a big believer in context-based learning. And the other thing is, because our nonverbal kids can't ask questions, if you're talking about something sitting at a table at home and they don't know what it is and they can't ask what it is, that lesson is partially lost. But if you're out at a museum and you're talking about this exhibit in front of you, they have the context and the visuals to see it. And even if they can't answer the question, you're likely to get more learning out of that experience than sitting at a table with a list of words. You're right.
Yeah.
So right.
Absolutely. So can we talk a little bit about building relationships without words? Because, we don't want our kids to be isolated. But yet, how do they connect with their peers? How do they build relationships when communication is very limited?
That's a really hard question. And that's a really hard topic for parents to think about, because many times our kids don't have friends because they're nonverbal. It takes a special kind of friend, and I found two things. One, if I want her to have peers who are friends, I have to spend time teaching either the parent or the child how to be her friend. But there's no guarantee that the friendship will last or how long it'll last. The younger they are, the easier it is, because they're probably, they're not so far behind yet. They're just a little bit behind. In most cases. In a lot of cases, they're close enough to where they can play for short periods, but the older child will get bored with the abilities of your child. But it takes a lot of training and prompting on the parent's part. And then when they're older, what usually ends up happening, so that's one scenario. The other thing is, your child's friends will just be their caregivers, and they're older people in their life who are adult enough to understand what's going on and have the willingness to take the time to get to know your child and to work with them and to try to understand their communication. Right. Just like any relationship, it kind of has to be a two-way street. And most kids in general are pretty self-focused, and they can't put themselves in another person's shoes long enough to develop a friendship. So, I mean, it's just
right. Well, I mean, they're
reality.
working on so many things from their own perspective just to be able to be in that type of setting. And so there's so much that they're trying to manage when they're disorganized, that they're doing their best just to hold it together. And so it is hard to be other focused when you're like that. And but when other people understand that, and like you said, they have to have the willingness to understand and the ability to be outwardly focused and not on themselves. And so that takes maturity too. So it's a lot of things involved with that, but yes.
Well, it's not a happy answer, because the answer is either you do a lot of work, which you're already, doing a lot of work with your kid anyway. And it's just like one more thing you have to do. So I didn't often go that route, if ever. Other times you just accept the fact that your child's friends are going to usually be older and than your child's age, whatever that is. Sometimes a little bit older, sometimes a lot older. And they just, your child's friendships will not look like yours or a neurotypical friendship. Yeah. It's a hard reality to face, but you get to face that at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just in general, our children and us as well have a lot of isolation. And can you talk a little bit about that to be encouraging to families? I know you have a lot of wisdom in this area, and struggled a lot. Probably sought God a lot on those journeys yourself, and just what you've learned through that process.
I mean, not being discouraging, like saying, it's just life. No. So, yeah, your world becomes smaller when you have a special needs child. If you've been has spent any time on this journey, you already know that.
Yeah.
So the trick is to accept the smaller world and make it rich. Mm-hmm. Because what often happens, and happened to me for a long time, was, I felt the isolation and I felt all that stuff, but I didn't fill it up. I just stayed isolated and kind of resented my life for a time and what was going on, and not being able to go out. I couldn't go out for years because of shoes in restaurants. So I didn't go out to eat with the family. We didn't walk into church together for years. That has recently changed. Yay, shoe wars almost over. And the friends, even I have this other really close friend, and she has a special needs daughter, but her daughter's a little bit more higher functioning. And when I would go visit her, I would kind of resent that she always let her daughter hang around with us, not realizing that, that's the only friends her daughter has, kind of. And then when my child is older now and I went to see her, she was experiencing resentment because my daughter is vocal and was being disruptive in a restaurant. We went to go see her recently. And, and she's older than I am. So it was stressing her out, I could tell. Mm-hmm. And she was kind of like wishing I could tell. And we're close enough friends, we can talk about this.
Right.
But it was, so even when you have friends who have special needs kids, they're not, their kids' problems are not your problems. And that could be stressful too. It's like you can, you want people to accept your kid, but then you don't want to accept theirs either. And that was very, very stressful for me. But really the thing is just to make it, so what I finally decided to do was just to make our lives rich in whatever way I could, whatever scenarios in life she could tolerate. She loves going out. And so my husband, so that I can work on certain nights, he will take her out to our local we have like a little downtown area that's kind of built up and it's got some nightlife going on. So there are always people down there, and there's a train station and all that. And he takes her there and they walk around. And so she gets to see people. So that enriches her life. She loves her church friendship club. So that enriches her life. So we find things that enrich her life. And for me, I actually like doing a lot of this technology and stuff. So having time to work on the adapted home education site and things and products, that's enriching for me. And the hardest thing still for enrichment is my husband and I. We have downtime, and now we've gotten to where we can tell my daughter, okay, you need to entertain yourself, or you need to go to your room and, do some things up there for a while so we can have downtime. But that wouldn't have been possible in the early days. But at that point, the boys were still living at home. So we could say, go play with your brothers.
Yeah.
so you find ways where their life is still enriched, even though it's limited, or isolated is. It's isolation compared to what you're used to, but it's really just
or compared to what the world says that your kid should be exposed to, and all these activities they need to be involved in. I think we need to redefine what normal, healthy, just our sphere is for our family, and that's very different for every family and every child. Instead of saying, I have kids coming into my studio, they're involved in an activity every night. And it just makes me overwhelmed thinking about their schedule, because then they're in school all day on top of it. And I'm like, when are you home? When do you get to talk as a family? And those are things that I think if we have kids that have these struggles, we're much more intentional about limiting and creating that safe space that is healthy for all of us, because if we get out of whack with that, it shows up instantly. It's not something you can say, oh, yeah, we'll pass that on to another day. It shows up in temper tantrums or meltdowns or a whole lot of other things.
I've had a few of those myself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's look at my planner today or this week. That's why I feel that way.
That's right. And my downtime is before everybody in the house gets up. So I'd rather I'm a morning person in general. So I'd rather go to bed a little bit earlier and wake up before everyone else and have a couple of hours of quiet. And if I don't get that, I really can't function very well. If I do that for like a week or two and miss that time, it really takes a toll on me. So making space, is another good part of it. You just have to have space. Within the isolation, you have space. So space, rich experiences, the ones you can have, and just embracing that that's your new life. And it's not bad. It's just different than what you had planned or were used to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a very good perspective. And we have so much to be thankful for. And I think we're always looking for the next thing. It's just naturally the way our society works, instead of appreciating what we have and how we can build on what we already got. And it's very countercultural, but it's actually how God asks us to live. He asks us to be thankful, to worry about today. Tomorrow has worries of its own. And I know you're probably the same way as me. I homeschooled for 19 years, and I know that those years changed me because I was forced to change in who I was, how I thought about things, how I perceived my children, how we interacted, all of that. But coming out, it was much better on the end than I ever expected it to be, especially on how I have changed and how God has just used that to be kind of a very refining experience.
I don't see the changes. I mean, it's been, so many years, I'm sure it did, but recently, in the past few months, I guess, over the past year, I've had people like make comments about me to my face or like in a little thank you card. And they say things about me that I'm like, whoa, is that really what they think of me? It's like very positive things they're saying. I'm like going, that's not at all how I see myself. And no one has ever said that about me before in my life. Like using the word kind. That was never applied to me in the past. So this special needs life must have softened me. Now I'm a kind person.
Yes. Well, it's a fruit of the spirit. So yes, you're exhibiting the fruit, and it really does. This lifestyle pushes us to be closer to the vine, and to be pruned. We pruned greatly, and yet you bear more fruit. I mean, it's so in line with how God works, and it's beautiful. But it is very difficult. It's a hard path to take. And I just want to thank you for, just opening up your life, sharing from your experience, and giving parents a lot of hope and some very practical applications to especially how to teach, because like we talked at the beginning, this can be very frustrating, very scary, and something you just want to run away from, but hopefully not now.
That's right. You can do it. You can do it.
Yes, exactly. Do you have any closing advice for parents as we wrap up?
Well, the thing I would say is, just like reading, writing, and arithmetic are considered core skills for academics, communication is a core skill for life. And so do take the time, set aside some of those other things if you have to. Because here we are, my daughter's, late teens, and she's still not able to communicate her thoughts with people. But I remember one time when she was about 6 years old, when we got the iPad, and I said, we're going to teach you how to communicate. And she came over, and her little 6-year-old body grabbed my knees and gave me the biggest, tightest squeeze for the longest time that you could ever imagine.
Oh.
So I know that she wants to communicate, and she has for a very long time. So don't think that communication shouldn't be part of your homeschool. It should. It should be primary. It should be right up there with reading, writing, and arithmetic. Right. And doesn't matter what the state says about that. For practical, because the one thing is, why do people go to school? To train them for being productive in society, life after high school, along the way, you get all the character building and all these other things.
Yeah.
So that's why communication is so key in the homeschool years, because you're trying to prepare your child for adulthood. So use any communication method that your child can do. Start with that, but work towards one where your child can openly communicate with other people to the best of their ability. One thing I didn't talk about is like eye gaze technology. So even if your child can't point at things, right, or can't type or spell or write, using eye gaze technology, there are all kinds of things to do. And I'm happy to answer any questions. You can email me, Stephanie at adaptedhomeed.com. And I'm happy to talk to you and help you or answer questions.
Yeah, and your website link will also be in our show notes. So if you want to connect with Stephanie and her resources, you can go to adaptedhomeed.com and find those two. Just click on the link. It's a little easier than if trying to figure out how that's spelled. So yes. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. This has been just another amazing interview. And so Stephanie is also a co-host here on Empowering Homeschool Conversations. And so she's popping in and out often, and don't know what's coming up next. I know next week we're going to be talking about managing parenting overload. I pre-recorded that a while ago, just on your own nervous system, Mom and Dad, and how to take care of that, and maybe help with the calm in your house, starting with you. So yeah,
very
absolutely.
Needed.
Absolutely. Yes. Something I needed a whole lot. So you'll hear about that story a little bit too. So I just want to thank you all for joining us on this powerful conversation on Empowering Homeschool Conversations. I hope today's episode gave you not only some practical ideas, but also the encouragement to know you're not alone. If you're feeling overwhelmed or unsure about how to teach your unique learner, especially if your child is nonverbal, help is available. You can visit Stephanie's website at adaptedhomeed.com, and also invite you to visit spedhomeschool.com, where you can find access to experienced consultants who can walk with you step by step, diagnostic tests and learning tools to help you understand your child's strengths and struggles, a growing library of resources tailored to homeschoolers with extraordinary needs, and most importantly, a community of support, encouragement, and wisdom from parents who have been exactly where you are. We believe every child can learn and every parent can teach. You're doing important work, and you don't have to do it alone. Until next time, keep homeschooling boldly and confidently, and we will see you next week. Bye, everybody. I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
For some of us, personal finances aren't just personal. They include loved ones, neighbors, the communities we call home, and the causes we hold in our hearts. At Thrivent, planning your finances is bigger than just money. We help you put your plans into motion and faith into action so you can do more for the ones in your heart. Because sometimes all you need to make a difference is someone to help you make it happen. Thrivent, where money means more. Connect with us at Thrivent.com.